For over a month, I had been searching on the dating site I joined, trying to find a good match. I was careful not to share my full name or where I lived, especially because I was a woman living alone. On my profile, I mentioned that I enjoyed social activities like dining out, watching movies, and outdoor sports like hiking, running, and swimming. I also shared that I was 5'8" inches with shoulder-length blonde hair and in my mid-30s. Unlike many men who often posted pictures from when they were younger, I chose not to add a photo of myself. It was a Thursday evening after a long day at my office job at a large insurance company in downtown Chicago. Despite working in a bustling office, I hadn't met any promising men there. The few I dated were disappointments. So I turned to online dating in hopes of finding better prospects. That night, I reviewed profiles of 7 potential matches from the dating site. After looking over their details and photos, only one seemed promising. A 30-year-old man named Lucas. He was 6 tall, or so he claimed, and liked sports and the outdoors, much like myself. We spent the next few nights exchanging messages through the dating site. Lucas seemed nice and appeared handsome, based on his picture. After some thought, we decided to meet at Benny's, a local food and wine bar, on Saturday night at 8 p.m. We planned to wear a red carnation so we could easily spot each other. The one who arrived first would grab a table and wait. By Saturday afternoon, I was already nervous about the date. I worried about what to wear, whether to wear my hair up or down, and other typical pre-date concerns. I stopped by the florist to buy a bunch of red carnations, picking the best one to pin on my new dress. I arrived at Benny's at 7:30 p.m., a little early, and secured a table. I ordered a martini on the rocks and settled in to wait. The bar was filled with various groups, couples, large gatherings of men, and tables of women enjoying their evening. My watch showed 8:20 p.m., but there was still no sign of Lucas or anyone with a red carnation. Great, I muttered under my breath, feeling both upset and a little insulted. He could have at least shown up. If he didn't like what he saw, he could have made up an excuse and left. I decided to give it another 10 minutes, until 8:30 p.m., then I'd leave. I walked to the bar and back to my table, scanning the crowd for anyone wearing a red carnation like me, hoping that perhaps he hadn't noticed me in the now crowded place. But no one matched the description of Lucas, the man from the profile. Was I tricked badly, or had he simply not shown up? By 8:30 p.m., I felt certain he wasn't coming. I grabbed my coat and left the bar. The walk home would take about 15 minutes. The streets were brightly lit and there were plenty of people around, which made me feel a bit safer. Yet, as I walked, a creeping sensation of being followed washed over me. I stopped a few times to look around casually, but I couldn't spot anyone suspicious. Pausing again near a shop window, I finally saw him. A man in a long dark coat holding a black and silver cane. He looked away quickly when I caught sight of him. As I resumed walking, so did he. My heart started to race and I quickened my pace. This part of the street was quieter and less residential. I crossed the street to test if he was truly following me, and he crossed too. I turned left onto my street, and my heart sank. The street lamps near my building were out, leaving the sidewalk in darkness, except for some faint lights from the houses across the street. Panic set in. I sprinted toward my building, rushed up the stairs, and yanked the communal door open. I darted into the elevator and pressed the button for the 4th floor. Just as the elevator doors began to close, a cane suddenly shot out, blocking them. The doors reopened, and I was frozen with fear. The large figure of the man in the dark coat stepped into the elevator, holding a knife in his other hand. In that terrifying moment, I realized the man's face was hidden under a balaclava. I screamed without stopping, frozen in fear as he just stood there. Suddenly, another person burst into the elevator, wearing a suit and sporting a red rose on his lapel. He grabbed the attacker by the neck and yelled, "Drop the knife!" He then used a taser on the assailant, who collapsed right there in the elevator, with me standing just feet away. The man in the suit quickly disarmed the attacker and handcuffed him. Breathing heavily, he turned to me and introduced himself as Lucas, the man I was supposed to meet for our date. He apologized for his lateness and explained that after he spotted my red carnation as he was leaving the bar, he noticed a man behaving suspiciously and following me. Lucas, as it turned out, was a Chicago police officer. Right person, right place, right time. The creep was wanted for several attacks on women over the past 6 months. Lucas and I eventually went on our intended date. Despite the horrifying start, we connected well and began seeing each other regularly. The fear from that night lingered. Paramedics had to be called as I couldn't stop shaking from the shock. The rush of adrenaline was so intense, I felt as though I might die from the panic alone. After the incident, Lucas stayed with me, comforting me until another police unit arrived to take the assailant away in a squad car. The man was later charged and found guilty on multiple counts. Reflecting on that night, the reality hit hard. My date was a police officer who, although late, ended up saving my life. His tardiness seemed insignificant compared to his actions that night. I sat at the table, feeling uneasy. My hands trembled slightly. It was my first date in quite some time. Let me skip ahead a few weeks. I had started chatting with a man named Mark on a lesser-known dating app. This app wasn't very popular, only about 100,000 downloads. And I'm not sure why I chose it over more popular ones like Tinder. I guess I found comfort in the smaller user base. It felt quieter, less overwhelming. Even an average-looking woman can get bombarded with messages on the big apps, and I preferred fewer but possibly more meaningful interactions. Mark and I hit it off and decided to meet for dinner at a local Chinese restaurant in the city center. It was to be our first face-to-face meeting, though we had exchanged photos. I don't recall the name of the app, but it required users to upload at least 3 pictures and a brief bio. You also had to list your physical details, height, weight, and so on. Some details were optional, but Mark had filled out everything. He was about 5 feet 10 inches tall, weighed around 200 pounds, and had a muscular build. He also had dark spiked hair, a bit of stubble instead of a full beard, and strikingly white teeth, almost unnaturally so. I arrived at the restaurant about 5 minutes early. Luckily, Mark had called the day before to reserve a table for 2. As I was escorted to our table, nerves kicked in. I always wondered what was more awkward, arriving first and sitting alone, or walking in to find your date already waiting and watching. That night, I wore heels. I'm a bit clumsy, especially when I'm nervous, so it was probably for the best that I was the first to arrive. I settled into my seat, and the waitress offered me a drink. I declined, preferring to wait for Mark. It felt polite to do so. She then handed me the menus for drinks and food, asking me to start thinking about what I might like to order. I took the menus from her and began to look through them, trying to distract myself from my growing anxiety. I had been to Chinese restaurants before. It wasn't something extraordinary for me. The real purpose of being there was the date, to meet this man named Eric. Minutes ticked by, and Eric was nowhere in sight. It was past 7 o'clock, the time we agreed to meet. I figured it wasn't a huge issue. Maybe he was caught in traffic or lost his way. I was prepared to wait even if he was 20 minutes late. He could have called. After all, he had my number. Eventually, he arrived 10 minutes late. I pretended to scrutinize the menu, though I had already chosen what I wanted. When Eric entered, I noticed he wasn't the 5'10" inches he claimed to be. He looked about my height, 5'6". This was a bit disappointing, but I knew it was common for men to add a few inches to their height online. I decided not to let this initial lie ruin our evening. As he approached, I stood up, greeted him with a hug and a peck on the cheek. The greeting was awkward and he seemed to lack confidence. He was handsome, with sharp facial features and a neat stubble. Thankfully, his photos had been accurate. But there was a tension from the start, something unsettling about Eric's demeanor. As we sat down, his legs shook uncontrollably, like someone with restless leg syndrome. This was quite distracting, but I assumed he was just nervous about the date. The conversation stumbled along with awkward pauses. He asked typical questions. Was I studying or working? Just as the silence grew too heavy, the waitress came over and we ordered drinks and starters. The restaurant had filled up by now. It was around 7:20, and the noise level had increased significantly. Everyone seemed to have made reservations, and we had to speak louder to hear each other. The starters were delicious, and we proceeded to order our main courses. As we ate, Eric became increasingly jittery. His knee bounced so vigorously it knocked the underside of the table, causing our glasses and bowls to rattle. He avoided eye contact, glancing away whenever I tried to look him in the eyes, never holding my gaze for more than a moment. This was shaping up to be one of the most uncomfortable dates I'd ever been on, but it wasn't over yet. The restaurant was now buzzing with activity. Every table was occupied. Midway through the meal, I decided to visit the restroom. I informed Eric, and he merely hummed in response. In the restroom, I took a moment to check my appearance in the mirror and use the facilities, as one typically does. When I returned from the restroom, something very odd happened. As I approached our table, Eric was there, still focused on his meal. I sat down, and suddenly, a woman from a nearby table rushed towards us. She grabbed my drink abruptly and demanded I stand up. "You need to come with me now, outside," she said sternly. Confused, I glanced at Eric, wondering what was happening. He didn't look up or acknowledge the situation, just kept his eyes on his food. I followed the woman outside. She was about my height, with gray hair, and appeared to be in her mid to late 50s. She took my wine glass with her, opened the restaurant door, and led me outside. After making sure the door had closed behind us, she urgently told me to leave and never return. She revealed that while I was in the restroom, Eric had spiked my drink. She had seen him drop something into it, causing it to fizz and dissolve. "Go down the street and don't look back," she instructed. As we peered back into the restaurant, we saw Eric slowly standing, looking towards the door. The woman quickly dumped the wine into a flower container outside and urged me to hide in the store next to the restaurant. She said she would confront Eric to buy me some time and told me to call the police immediately. I rushed into the nearby convenience store, which was something like a 7-Eleven. I explained to the clerk that someone had attempted to drug me and might be following me. He quickly led me to the back rooms of the store and instructed me to dial 911 from their landline. I hid there until the police arrived. According to the woman who had helped me, she told Eric that I had left, and he simply walked away. When the police arrived, they couldn't find him. Even though city cameras captured some footage of him, they couldn't track down his address or real name. The dating app was unable to locate his GPS or IP address, so he was never caught. I never learned the name of the woman who saved me that night. She was a true guardian angel, and without her intervention, I dread to think what might have happened. This terrifying experience has completely turned me off from dating. It was a shocking and traumatic ordeal that could have ended much worse. Both the store clerk and the mysterious woman were instrumental in saving me from a potentially deadly situation. Back in 2017, when I was 19 years old, I found myself on a first date with a boy I had met at a local bowling center. At that time, I was always looking for reasons to get out of my house. My parents argued a lot, which made home a pretty awful place to be. The constant stress and shouting created a really bad environment for someone my age, so I tried to stay away as much as possible. I'd hang out with friends, go to sleepovers from Friday to Monday, or even stay at hotels. Going on dates was another excuse for me not to sleep at home. Things were really tough. On one of those dates, I met this guy. After we met at the bowling center, we started talking and exchanged phone numbers. We agreed to meet up, just the two of us. For our date, we didn't plan anything fancy. Since we were both too young to go to bars, we thought it would be fun to go to Walmart, buy some snacks and food, and then head to the nearby park. I had only met this guy once before, but he seemed pretty cool and didn't give me any reason to suspect anything bad. I usually have a good sense of people's character. Because of the constant tension at home, I had learned to read my parents' emotions very well. I knew when my dad was angry and likely to lose his temper, and I could tell when my mom was stressed or frightened. This helped me understand other people's behavior quickly, and I could usually tell who was genuine and who wasn't. This guy gave off a genuine vibe, which is why what happened next on our date wasn't really about him. After our trip to Walmart, we drove his truck to the park. The park had a skate park area with a big curved bowl structure used by skateboarders. I never learned the official name for these things since I was never into skating. We sat near this structure in the darkness. The park was empty, silent, and pitch black, making it a bit eerie. I was eating a pack of Cheetos, not really caring about my breath around him. It's funny to think about that now. I believe he was drinking some soda, although my memory might be a bit fuzzy. But I remember the sound of him popping open a can. As we sat there, the night around us was eerily quiet. There was a slight breeze that was cool, but not too cold, which felt kind of nice. I remember wearing a jacket, jeans, and some comfortable shoes. We were both just sitting there, legs hanging off the edge of the skate bowl, eating our snacks, when suddenly we heard rustling noises coming from the bushes and trees just behind us. At first, it was just a slight noise, like something moving stealthily through the leaves. I glanced over at Tom, who was sitting on my right. He stopped mid-sip from his soda can and set it down between us. He turned his head slowly towards the noise, trying to peer through the darkness to see what was there. For a couple of seconds, the noise stopped. Then, very clearly, we heard what sounded like something, or someone, climbing out of the bushes. The sound was heavy, like the thud of a large animal, or worse, a person. Tom looked at me, his eyes wide. By this time, I had stopped munching on my Cheetos. My jaw was tight with fear. "It's probably just a cat," Tom tried to reassure me, his voice uncertain. "Or maybe a dog?" But the suggestion seemed unconvincing given the heaviness of the sounds. It was almost midnight, and we had no light with us. Our eyes had somewhat adjusted to the darkness, aided only by the nearly full moon which illuminated the open space around us, but not the dense bushes behind us. Whatever was there, it stayed hidden in the shadows, making it impossible to see clearly. We sat in silence for a few more minutes, neither of us daring to resume eating. The relaxed mood of our date had completely changed. We felt tense, as if we were being watched, or as if someone was creeping up on us. Suddenly, the rustling started again, but this time it was louder and more distinct. Tom swore he saw something move quickly from one bush to another. He gasped a little when he saw it, and I could tell he was scared. "Did you see that?" he whispered to me, his voice shaky. "Something's definitely there." The atmosphere was thick with tension, and every sound seemed amplified in the silence of the park. We sat there, not moving, barely breathing, straining our ears for any hint of movement. The sense of dread grew with each passing minute, as we realized that this was no ordinary interruption on a night out. Something unsettling was lurking close by, hidden in the darkness just beyond our sight. Tom quickly stood up, grabbed his half-full soda can, and threw it into the bushes, hoping to scare off whatever was hiding there. But there was no reaction. No sound of an animal running away. Nothing. That's when I suggested we should probably leave. We quickly packed up our snacks, which were scattered all around us, stuffed them into his bag, and headed back to his truck. The parking lot was just a short walk from the skate bowl, maybe about 10 steps or so. As we reached his truck and were putting the snack bag in the trunk, I glanced towards the bushes. Standing there was a figure dressed in a clown outfit, holding what appeared to be a 20-inch machete. The blade shimmered under the moonlight, and it looked like it was covered in blood. Tom let out a loud scream, the loudest I'd ever heard from anyone. It was a scream full of terror, as if he was genuinely fearing for his life. He frantically scrambled for his keys to unlock the driver's side door. Meanwhile, I was panicking too, my whole body shaking uncontrollably. I could barely stand as fear gripped me. Tom's truck was an old model, probably from the 90s, and it didn't have automatic locks. He struggled to fit the key into the lock because he was shaking so much. I crouched behind the truck, peering occasionally at the clown, who remained eerily still, just staring at us. It never crossed my mind that this could be a prank. It wasn't Halloween or April Fool's Day, and there were no cameras in sight. This felt all too real. Finally, Tom managed to unlock the door. He swung it open, reached into the glove compartment, and pulled out a handgun. In seconds, he began firing towards the clown. The clown quickly ducked back into the bushes. After firing a few rounds, Tom stopped shooting, threw the gun back into the glove box, and shouted at me to get into the truck. I jumped into the passenger seat, and we slammed the doors shut. Tom hit the gas, and we sped away from the park. We drove without stopping, running through every stop sign. We drove like that for about 20 minutes. I know it wasn't right, but we were too scared to slow down. We felt like our lives were in real danger. I don't know what that clown was planning to do, or what he was thinking, but that night remains the most terrifying experience of my life. It happened to be on one of my first dates, and surprisingly, the guy I was with might have actually saved my life. 4 months ago, I moved to Ohio to start a new job in Columbus. I managed to find an apartment only 15 minutes away from work. This was great because it meant I didn't have to travel too far every day. Back in my old job, I had to commute for an hour each way, which really cut into my sleep time. A few months after settling into my new job, I started thinking about dating. I noticed a few interesting women at work. Sadly, when I tried to ask one out, it turned out she wasn't interested in men and was actually dating another woman from the finance department. That was unexpected, I thought to myself. The next woman I approached was very outgoing and always nice to me. But when I invited her for a drink, she kindly declined, saying she was married with kids, and her husband wouldn't appreciate it. My last try was with a friendly receptionist who always laughed at my jokes. I thought I had a chance there, but when I asked her out, she also said no. My confidence was pretty shaken after striking out 3 times. So, for the following weeks, I just focused on my work and kept to myself. One Friday evening after work, I grabbed some takeout, opened a can of beer, and turned on the TV. The first thing I saw was an ad for a dating website promising to find the perfect match for a small fee. I decided to try my luck and signed up for 3 different dating sites, hoping to increase my chances of finding someone. I tried to make my profile as interesting as possible, hoping to attract the right kind of match. But I soon found out that online dating wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. Many people didn't really match their profiles. Some were completely different, just like catfish. Finally, I got a promising match. We chatted by email and agreed to meet the next week at a downtown bar at 8 p.m. We would both bring a book so we could recognize each other. I arrived 10 minutes early and found a quiet table. Right at 8 p.m., a tall, pretty woman with a book walked in and headed to the bar. This was our sign to recognize each other, holding books. She looked around, saw me, and walked over. "You must be Mike," she said, checking if I was the person she was supposed to meet. "Yeah, but please call me Mikey," I responded, smiling back. She introduced herself then. "I'm Sally on the internet, but my real name is Samantha." She sat down and I got us drinks. She seemed nice and quite self-assured. I asked if my height was an issue since she was quite tall. She laughed it off, saying it was the person that mattered, not their height. Relieved, I felt better, as I'm about average height for a man. She suddenly grabbed my book from the table. "Let's stash these away. We don't want people thinking we're librarians," she joked. Just then, another woman walked into the bar, also holding a book, and went straight to the bar. "That's odd. She's also tall and has bright red hair. What a coincidence," I thought to myself. Samantha noticed my distraction and suggested, "Shall we go somewhere a bit quieter?" I agreed, and we left the bar, her leading the way. I didn't mind following. She was quite captivating. As Samantha led the way, I noticed how she kept glancing back, as if making sure the red-haired girl at the bar wasn't following us. Trying to lighten the mood, I asked, "Is she a friend of yours?" Samantha turned to me, her expression suddenly serious, and said flatly, "No." Then she walked out the door and I hurried after her. Outside, she pointed to a dark sedan parked across the street. "That's my car over there." "You brought your car, right?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "Good, follow me." And with that, she was off. As I followed her, I realized she hadn't mentioned which bar we were going to next. We drove for what seemed like half an hour, leaving Columbus and heading towards a small town called Newark. Suddenly, she veered off onto a barely lit side road. The area became increasingly secluded, and I couldn't help thinking this was getting weird. Hopefully this bar is worth the drive, I thought to myself. Her car's brake lights glowed red as she turned left onto a rough, bumpy track. We continued for about 5 minutes until I saw a light ahead through the trees. Her car turned into a driveway leading to a large old house, hidden by shadows. Instead of stopping at the front, she drove around to the side where 2 large barns stood under dim lights, barely lighting the area. I parked next to her, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. As she got out of her car, she flashed a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I thought we were heading to a bar in town," I said, confused. She chuckled. "I thought about it, but then I decided to bring you here instead. You should feel special. Come on." I locked my car and followed her across the yard toward the house, passing by several old cars parked near the barns. "Having a party or something?" I joked, looking at the cars. "No," she replied. No party. These cars are just old family keepsakes. I'm not ready to let them go. Her voice was oddly sentimental. A strong, unpleasant smell hit me and I grimaced. Is there a farm nearby? Smells like animals. No farm, she said, but we do keep some pigs out back. The smell gets strong when the wind shifts. Sorry about that. At the back door, she paused and looked at me curiously. You don't have any pet allergies, do you? No, why? I asked, starting to feel uneasy. That's good. I have a few cats. She opened the door, and as the light spilled out, she called into the house. Mum's home. Where are my babies? Immediately, 3 cats darted into the kitchen, meowing loudly, followed by 5 more, all clamoring for her attention. My initial thought was, oh no, she's one of those cat people. She sat down, and the cats all tried to climb onto her lap. I stood there watching the chaotic affection of the cats, thinking, definitely a cat lady. She stood up and smiled at me again. Now you see why I asked about allergies. Can I get you something to drink? Yeah, a beer would be great, I replied, trying to sound relaxed. Great. I'll show you to the lounge first, she said, leading me through to a large room decorated with more cat paraphernalia and a huge fireplace. The atmosphere was cozy, yet something felt off. As she went to get the drinks, I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight might unfold into something beyond the ordinary. Samantha watched as I struggled to stand, her smile never fading. The bathroom is just down the hallway. First door on your left, she said, pointing casually. I tried to get up, but my legs felt like they were made of rubber. I collapsed back into the chair, feeling a wave of weakness wash over me. Samantha's eyes sparkled a bit too brightly as she watched me struggle. What's happening to me? I muttered, trying to grip the arms of the chair. Samantha tilted her head, her smile growing wider. Oh, Danny, how are you feeling? Her voice was soft, but carried a chilling undertone that made me shiver. I tried to answer, but my words slurred together. My arms and legs wouldn't listen to me. It was like they weren't mine anymore. I don't know. I feel weird, I managed to say, my voice weak. Samantha stood up smoothly and walked over to the side table where the keys lay scattered. She picked up a keychain, twirling it between her fingers. Sometimes we meet people who seem perfect at first, she began, her voice now eerily calm. But not everyone turns out to be who we expect them to be, right? Her words sent a chill down my spine. I tried to focus on her face, but it was becoming difficult to keep my eyes open. You see, Danny, I like to collect things, she continued, moving closer. Memories, moments, and sometimes people. People who think they can just come into my life and then leave whenever they want. I struggled to comprehend her words, feeling the room spin around me. What did you do to me? I asked, my speech heavy and slow. Just a little something to help you relax, she replied, her voice now a whisper as she leaned closer. You looked so tense, so worried. I want you to enjoy your time here with me. Panic set in as I realized I was not in control of my body. My mind raced to find a way out, but my limbs wouldn't cooperate. I watched helplessly as Samantha placed the keychain back on the table and picked up one of the many cat figurines. You know, Danny, each one of these represents someone special who came to visit. You'll be staying a bit longer than you planned, she said softly, almost tenderly. I wanted to scream, to run, but all I could do was sit there, trapped in my own body, as Samantha continued to talk about her collection. The cats around us seemed to sense the change in the air, their eyes fixed on me with a newfound intensity. As the reality of my situation set in, I realized this was no ordinary date, and Samantha was no ordinary woman. I was caught in a horror that I had not anticipated, far from any help, in the hands of a woman who saw me not as a guest, but as an addition to her chilling collection. I was sure something terrible was happening to me. I begged her to call for help. No, she said calmly. That's not necessary. It's just the drug I put in your drink. It makes it hard for you to move your arms and legs, but you can still breathe. I couldn't even properly panic. She admitted everything right in front of me, smiling. Men who use these dating sites are often predators, just looking for one thing, not true love. I've had a terrible experience before, and now I protect other women who might be hurt by men like them. My heart raced with fear. She was planning to kill me. I tried to yell for help. "Help! Someone call the police!" But my voice was just a faint whisper. Susan chuckled. "The drug also affects your vocal cords? Quite effective, isn't it?" She left the room and returned with a large wheelbarrow. Opening the patio doors, she came over to me and said, "Time to go, Danny." She lifted me effortlessly, placed me in the wheelbarrow, and wheeled me outside. "We're off to see the pigs," she sang. "They always enjoy fresh meat." I tried to scream again, but no sound came out. I couldn't move at all. I was completely paralyzed. Suddenly, a bright light shone directly in my face. Susan looked shocked and started to wheel me backward. "Stop right there!" a woman's voice commanded. "Susan," the woman continued, "you need to stop this. I'm protecting you." The light lowered, and I could see it was the red-haired woman from the bar, holding a flashlight in one hand and a gun in the other. "I've called the police. They're on their way. It's over," Susan cried out. "Sarah, you're my own sister. How could you betray me like this?" As sirens sounded in the distance, police arrived, guns drawn, and instructed the red-haired woman, now identified as Sarah, to put down her gun. It turned out the cars belonged to missing men who Susan had lured and presumably fed to her pigs. Police suspected there could be as many as 6 other victims still unaccounted for. After 2 days in the hospital recovering from the drug, I learned that Susan had intercepted my emails with Sarah, her sister, and had shown up in her place after sabotaging Sarah's car to delay her. Susan was arrested and charged with murder, though the full extent of her crimes remained unclear. This ordeal taught me a harsh lesson. A simple drug can incapacitate anyone, no matter their size. It's a dangerous world, especially on blind dates. Thanks to her sister Sarah, I survived what could have been a gruesome death. And in a twist of fate, Sarah and I started dating after the incident. Looking back, it's surreal to think how close I came to a fatal end. But through this nightmare, I found something truly good. My relationship with Sarah. She saved my life, and for that, I'm forever grateful. I was on a first date with a girl named Amy, and she almost choked to death in the movie theater. We decided to watch a movie and ended up choosing the Transformers film. We weren't sure what to watch, but we thought a movie like that might be a bit silly and fun. As we started watching, we endured the usual long string of ads and trailers that seemed to last forever. Amy chose a big bucket of popcorn, half sweet and half salty, while I picked up some candies and a soda. We found seats not too far from the screen, about 3 rows back. Because of our close seats, my eyes were struggling right from the start. I had forgotten my glasses, so I had to squint the entire time, which was quite uncomfortable and straining. About halfway through the movie, Amy started to choke. After her 5th cough, I realized something serious was happening. She had accidentally swallowed a popcorn kernel whole, and it had gotten stuck in her throat, blocking her airway. There she was, choking amid a loud action scene in Transformers, while I frantically tried to figure out how to help her. I didn't know what to do. I had no idea about first aid, but there we were in a cinema full of people watching this movie, and Amy couldn't breathe. The first thing I thought of was to stand her up and try that emergency move where you squeeze someone's ribs from behind. I didn't even know the name of the move, but I had seen a few videos online and knew it could work. It was hard to believe that something as small and soft as popcorn could cause such trouble. But it seemed Amy had just been swallowing it without chewing properly, maybe even 6 or 7 pieces at once. So there we were, standing in the middle of the aisle, on the steps of the cinema, and I was desperately trying to get the popcorn out of her throat while the movie kept playing. By now, several people had noticed our struggle and realized what was happening. It must have been about 2 whole minutes now, and Amy was still choking and not breathing well. So a group of people helped carry her into the hallway, closed the cinema door, and quickly called for first aid and security. They dialed 911, but eventually someone managed to perform the maneuver where they raised her arms above her head and then squeezed her lower torso. Finally, a couple of popcorn pieces flew out of her mouth. Then Amy started gasping for air, her face turning bright red from the near-death experience on our first date at the Transformers movie. Oddly enough, Amy is still my girlfriend to this day. We often talk about that night, especially now that we're engaged. It will probably be the highlight of my best man speech at our wedding next year. He wasn't there, but I've told him the story many times and he finds it incredibly funny. Looking back, it does seem a bit humorous. But at the moment, it was terrifying. I can laugh with Amy about it now, but the truth is she could have died that night. No one wants to think about dying in a cinema from choking on popcorn. Eventually, someone did manage to save her, and while I like to say I saved her life, the truth is, I didn't really know how to help, or what move made the difference. I still don't even know how to put someone in the recovery position if needed, which is quite worrying. I should probably sign up for a local first aid course. That night was a shock and an eye-opener, but also a story that Amy and I will always remember. This story isn't like those strange love tales you often hear. This one made me cautious about the people I meet on the internet. I started chatting with Jake on a dating website. Right from the start, we hit it off. He was easy to talk to, and it seemed like he knew everything I did. Sometimes we disagreed, but nothing big enough to keep us from talking for more than a couple of hours. For the first couple of months, we never talked about meeting in person. I was fine with that. Most guys I've met just want to rush things, but I'm looking for something real. I didn't want just a fling, so I was happy just chatting online. There was no pressure from either side. It felt right because we both had more important things to focus on in our lives. I started to think my friends were right. Maybe I shouldn't waste time on a relationship that was just online. I was okay with being single for a long time. Even though he lived just an hour away by bus, I never thought of visiting him. That's because my last relationship ended terribly. I caught my ex cheating on me. It hurt a lot. Now, meeting someone new is tough, and I didn't want to mess things up with Jake, but I declined when he suggested we meet. I thought I was doing the right thing, but Jake got upset and didn't talk to me for a whole day. I knew I should have just moved on when he got mad, but I couldn't. I had invested so much time in our relationship, and I wasn't ready to let go over a small fight. I said sorry the next day, and so did he. Things went back to normal as if nothing had happened. Linda, my closest friend, was curious about Jake. I didn't mind her meeting him, but the truth was, I hadn't met him myself. We'd video chatted, texted, and shared photos, but it's not the same as meeting in person. One afternoon at work, I received a text from Jake. His messages always made me smile. "Hey, I know it's only been a few hours since we last spoke, but I miss you already. Hope you're having a great day." I read his text out loud and smiled. Then an idea popped into my head, so I texted back. "Jake, remember you once asked about grabbing coffee, and I said no?" I wrote casually. He replied quickly, "Yes. I remember saying I wouldn't ask again until you felt ready." "What if I said I'm ready now?" I asked. "Melissa, if you want to go on a date, just say the word. You know, you just have to tell me when you're ready," he replied. I paused to think about it. I saw his message but didn't respond right away. I was hesitant. What if he wasn't what I expected, or something went wrong? Maybe the problem was me, but I couldn't admit it. That evening, after returning from work, I lay on my couch lost in thought. After a while, I decided to call Cindy. "I know you're calling just to bug me. What's up?" she answered. "Could you be a bit nicer? Imagine, I was kidnapped and replaced by someone else just now," I joked. "Seriously though, I need your advice on something. And before you say anything, don't judge me. Just tell me what you think, okay?" I sighed. "All right, shoot," she replied, ready to listen. "I think I'm ready to meet. How about this Saturday?" I hesitated before sending the message, but finally I pressed send. Waiting for his reply was nerve-wracking. My mind raced with possibilities. What if he was different in person? What if he wasn't the kind-hearted man I'd come to know online? The idea sent a chill down my spine. Jake's response came quickly. "Saturday sounds perfect. How about the old cafe downtown at 5 p.m.? It's quiet and has a nice vibe." "That sounds great," I typed back, trying to sound more confident than I felt. As I set down my phone, a strange feeling washed over me. The night was unusually silent, and a sense of unease crept up my spine. I shrugged it off as just nerves about the upcoming date. The next few days went by in a blur of work and restless nights. Images of my last disastrous relationship haunted me, and the fear of history repeating itself gnawed at my thoughts. Finally, Saturday arrived. I dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that was both comfortable and flattering. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I tried to muster some excitement, but all I could feel was a growing sense of dread. I arrived at the cafe a few minutes early. The place was more secluded than I remembered, nestled between two old, worn-down buildings. The setting sun cast long shadows, and the wind whistled through the narrow alley, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I stepped inside the cafe, and the cozy warmth did little to ease my nerves. I scanned the room and saw Jake sitting at a table in the corner. He looked up and smiled, his face a reassuring sight. "Melissa, over here," he called out gently. As I approached, I noticed something odd about the way he was sitting, rigid and too perfectly poised, like a mannequin. His smile was a bit too wide, too forced. We exchanged greetings, and he offered me a cup of coffee. As he handed it to me, his fingers brushed against mine. They were ice cold. "So, Melissa," he began, his voice lower than it had been on our calls. "Tell me everything about your day." I tried to focus on the conversation, but his intense gaze made me uncomfortable. As I spoke, he leaned in closer, nodding at everything I said, but his eyes never blinked. Halfway through my story about work, I paused. Jake's face seemed to twitch unnaturally, and for a split second, I thought I saw something dark flash across his expression. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "Perfectly," he replied quickly, his voice smooth as silk but with a hint of something I couldn't quite place. It sounded almost delighted. The conversation continued, but with each passing minute I felt more trapped. Jake's questions grew more probing, and his demeanor shifted subtly from charming to unnerving. As the evening wore on, the cafe emptied, leaving us alone in the dim light. My discomfort grew until it was almost palpable, filling the space between us like a thick fog. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, my heart pounding in my chest. In the mirror, I saw my pale face and wide, scared eyes staring back at me. What was happening? Was I overreacting? Or was there something truly wrong with Jake? I decided I couldn't go through with the rest of the evening. I texted my friend Cindy, asking her to call me with an emergency in 5 minutes. As I waited, I rehearsed my escape, planning to leave as soon as I got the call. But when I returned to the table, Jake was standing, his expression dark and unreadable. "Leaving so soon?" he asked, his tone cold and menacing. I froze, realizing that the man before me might not be the Jake I thought I knew. The horror of the situation was clear. I was alone with a stranger who might not have my best interests at heart. My breaths were quick and loud as I stumbled through the tall stalks of corn. The night was dark, and the moon only gave off a weak light that barely helped me see my path. Every sound made me jump. The rustling leaves, my own footsteps, even my heart pounding in my chest felt too loud in the eerie silence of the field. "Melissa, don't make this harder than it has to be," Jake's voice echoed behind me, terrifying and cold. I pushed myself harder, ignoring the sharp pain shooting through my leg. I knew I couldn't stop, not even to catch my breath. I had to get away from him. The thought of what would happen if he caught me spurred me on, fear giving me a burst of desperate energy. As I ran, my mind raced with questions. How could I have been so wrong about Jake? What did he want from me? Was this all a game to him from the beginning? The betrayal stung almost as much as the wound in my arm. Suddenly, I tripped over a hidden dip in the ground and fell hard. The air was knocked out of me, and for a moment, I lay there gasping, trying to recover. Pain flared up in my arm and leg, reminding me of my dire situation. I scrambled to my feet, limping as fast as I could. I could hear Jake's footsteps getting closer. He was enjoying this, the chase, the fear he instilled in me. "You can't run forever, Melissa. It's just a matter of time," he shouted, his voice filled with a twisted excitement that made my skin crawl. I glanced back and saw his silhouette not far behind, moving quickly through the cornfield. Panic surged through me. I needed to hide, to find some way to escape him. Up ahead, I saw a slight break in the cornfield. With the last bit of strength I had, I pushed toward it, hoping it might lead to a road or a house, somewhere I could find help. As I reached the edge of the cornfield, I broke into a small clearing. There was an old abandoned farmhouse a short distance away. It looked like it might fall apart at any touch, but it was my only chance. Without hesitation, I ran toward the farmhouse, my breaths ragged, my injuries screaming with every step. I reached the door and threw myself inside, slamming it shut behind me. The house was dark and smelled of damp and decay, but it offered a momentary refuge. I leaned against the door, trying to steady my breathing. I needed to think, to plan my next move. But before I could gather my thoughts, I heard Jake's footsteps outside. He was close. Too close. "Melissa, come out! This doesn't have to end badly." His voice was coaxing now, but underneath the calmness there was an undeniable threat. Terror gripped me again. I looked around frantically for something to defend myself with or another way out. The house creaked ominously, and somewhere in the darkness, a window shattered. The sound made me jump, and I realized this nightmare was far from over. I moved away from the door, deeper into the shadows of the house, my heart pounding. I had to survive, to find a way out. But as Jake's shadow appeared at the broken window, blocking the moonlight, I knew escaping him wouldn't be easy. He was determined, and now so was I. The fight was far from over, and I had to be ready for anything. My body hurt, and my legs were heavy as lead. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it over my own desperate breaths. Jake's footsteps grew louder and closer with every second. I pushed myself to keep running, to keep ahead of him. The fear of him catching me made me ignore the pain and tiredness. I ran past a broken fence, hearing footsteps right behind me. I dared not stop. I felt him almost touching my back, so I sprinted towards a dark area ahead. My legs weakened. I had lost much blood and my sleeve was soaked with it. I wasn't sure how much longer I could run. Suddenly my strength gave out, and I fell to the ground in the middle of the cornfield. Each second I spent running from Jake was a second spent in fear of what he might do. Tears streamed down my face as I heard the corn stalks bending. Jake was coming towards me. I couldn't move. Then there he was, with that horrible smile, knowing I was trapped. "There you are, my pretty little thing," Jake said as he closed in. I whimpered in fear. "That's sad, but I think I've had my fun." Jake raised his gun, aiming it at me, but then there was the sound of another gun being readied. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," a calm voice said. I looked up and saw an old man standing there with a shotgun. He fired, and Jake was knocked back a few feet. Too tired to move, I lay there on the ground, unable to react. "Are you okay, young lady?" the old man asked. I couldn't speak. My throat was too dry. The next thing I knew, I heard police sirens getting louder. I ended up in the hospital. The old man came with me. He had heard my cries for help. Jake didn't make it. The old man had acted in self-defense and in defense of me. All charges were dropped. It's been 2 weeks since that night, a night I'll never forget. My wounds have healed, and I can use my arm again. One thing is certain, I'm never dating online again. I've learned my lesson the hardest way possible.